Hello and greetings to all, and welcome to second episode of Retalks. Retalks is an initiative of Rika Institute with a dedicated focus on research and innovation. This institute is aimed to work in the sector of disaster education, innovation, research, training, and awareness generation so as to build a culture of resilience in our society. And Retalks are a series of talk shows planned every month featuring experts who will enable us to understand risk and building resilience. And we are very happy to welcome our today's guest, Dr. Tuhin Ghosh. Hello, sir, and let me briefly
Thank you.
introduce him to you all. Dr. Tuhin Ghosh is a professor and director of the School of Oceanographic Studies, Jadavpur University, India. He has expertise in coastal geomorphology, disaster management, climate change impacts, adaptation strategies, and human migration. He is the lead author of IPCC Special Report on Ocean and Cryosphere, Chapter 4 on sea level rise and implications for low-lying islands, coasts, and communities. He's also been invited to act as a lead author on urban climate science in UCCRN ARC3. And for our today's topic of discussion, it focuses on understanding and building awareness on cyclones. So, welcome to you once again, sir.
Thank you very much for inviting me in this occasion, in this present discussion forum. And please carry on with your time.
Okay. Thank you so much. And to begin with, if we can understand as to how the tropical cyclones are formed in the Bay of Bengal and if they have any peculiar trait, particularly with respect to the East Coast, and of course, with your experience of climate change, what have been the trends in the change because of change in the climate?
It's in the beginning, very interesting question. And I can tell you that by definition and from the theoretical background, the tropical cyclones are basically low pressure systems that form over warm tropical waters. They typically form when the sea surface temperature is about 26.5 degrees centigrade or above from that. A cluster of thunderstorms can develop over warm tropical oceans. And if that cluster persists in an area of low pressure, it can start rotating. If the conditions are just right, the cluster of thunderstorms can grow in size and sustain itself and then develop into a tropical cyclone. There are a few other factors for a cyclone, that is the warm temperature at sea surfaces, what I mentioned already. Coriolis force impact area that forms a low pressure zone. Atmospheric instability should be there, and increased humidity in the lower to middle levels of the troposphere must be there. And there must be something like that, a low vertical wind shear and pre-existing low-level disturbances or focus of the depression. And typically what you were asking, that is there anything typical things? Sometimes it happens that a slow-moving category 1 hurricane or cyclone, we used to say in our region, can dump a lot more rain and cause a lot of damage by flooding and landslides than a fast-moving category 5 cyclone. So size also matters. The category 1 could be a lot bigger than the category 5 and spend considerably more time on a given location where it is occurring. Another interesting thing is that people used to ask that why there are more cyclones formed in the Bay of Bengal than the Arabian Sea. So it's due to certain factors. Bay of Bengal is relatively warmer than the Arabian Sea, and the average sea surface temperature is much higher. Since there is more freshwater supply in the Bay of Bengal, because the rivers in the eastern coast mostly, the fresh water is lighter than the saline water, and it forms a thin layer on the surface. This thin layer of fresh water is heated more easily than the extremely salty water in the Arabian Sea. So therefore, the bay is more conducive to cyclone formation than the Arabian Sea. And you have also asked about the trend of cyclones, and from the recent publications research, we can see that some 2 to 3% of the total number of tropical cyclones expected to strike in the near future could be more stronger. But this is a decrease from 5.7% between 1980 to 2017. And this study has recently been published in the Science Advances. The estimation is there. And an increase in Arabian Sea tropical cyclone activity is not unusual according to the study. And it is noted that around 52% increase in the frequency of cyclonic storm in the West Coast. So it's alarming, really alarming. All over, roughly 80 to 100 tropical cyclones form globally, most of which never make landfall. So over the past 50 years, tropical cyclones have killed around 8 lakhs people and caused around 1,500 billion US dollar damage, economic losses. So it's according to the World Meteorological Organization. The concern is that about the frequency. And whenever we are listening that the frequency of the cyclones are being increased, it's not really true. It is wrongly placed, because if we have to judge the frequency, we need to consider the number of depressions formed and how many cyclones are really forming out of those depressions. So number of depressions are becoming lesser. The number of cyclones frequency is becoming lesser. But what is alarming that the severity of the cyclones are going very, very high. So that is most alarming thing. I think I could cover the things there.
Yes. Thank you so much, sir. And it was very interesting to know that it's not the frequency, but the severity actually, which is a cause of concern. And so, like you've already explained that why they are more prone in East Coast. Another trend which is observed is that cyclones mostly are happening during late summer and sometimes in autumn. So is there any particular reason behind that also?
As we have already discussed that the tropical cyclones need some warm ocean temperature to form and strengthen. The highest ocean temperature are reached about a month or more early to mid-fall, after the highest air temperatures over land, mid to late summer, because water is slower to be heated by the sun in the summer and to lose heat in the winter. And these tropical cyclones actually need some sort of a disturbance to form. This is another factor besides the sea surface temperature. A major source of these disturbances in tropical waves forming in the intertropical convergence zone, ITCZ. This is a band of thunderstorms surrounding the equator. During the summer, the ITCZ moves far enough into the summer hemisphere that the Coriolis effect induces circulation in areas of thunderstorms, creating tropical waves. That is necessary for formation of cyclone, and that is the favorable time for formation of cyclone. That's why in the late summer and the early autumn, we can get this kind of tropical cyclones.
Thank you so much, sir, for explaining the phenomenon of ITCZ also. And considering that currently we are also experiencing cyclone Asani. So cyclones are, like you've mentioned, that there are so many natural factors which contribute to it becoming a hazard. So what have been your experiences in previous cyclones also that natural hazard actually turns into a disaster?
Yeah. As we usually try to teach in the classes also, that the natural hazards like cyclone, as we are discussing on that, those are inevitable. We cannot really stop them. So our major aim should be to prevent the natural events from converting to a natural disaster. So any natural hazard converted to a disaster when this hazard meets the vulnerable condition of the people, property, infrastructure, and natural resources with lesser resilience, along with absence of preparedness. So we need to break this link. This is the ultimate objective of this natural hazards management. In that way, we should concentrate to minimize the vulnerability of those items through risk assessment of vulnerable population, property, infrastructure, and natural resources, preventive and impact minimization measures, and also preparedness and emergency response. And the major cyclone occurred in our region, that was Ayla, on 25th of May 2009, when the concept of disaster preparedness and emergency response were not much crystallized in India, in the country itself. The early warning and communication system was also not much efficient at that time. So initially, people could not realize the scale of damage with delayed response. And I went there after 4 days, witnessed so many things. Few things I can share with you. The rescue and relief operation was not efficient as there was no EOC, Emergency Operations Center, and there was no existence of standard operating procedures, SOPs. NGOs were really hyperactive for their publicity and distributing relief materials without knowing the locations in need. The relief materials were not properly selected. For example, the person trapped in the village lost everything, all the belongings, and with neck deep of water, the relief team provided him or her a sack of rice grain. Okay, so how they can cook? They cannot really cook. That is not in the position. And also in Ayla, we witnessed around 135 life loss and about 916 kilometer embankment breached out, which inundated the villages. Around 336 villages were inundated by saline water. And people could not really cultivate after 4 or 5 years also. So there are dead bodies of livestock scattered here and there and creating extremely unhygienic condition. Scarcity of drinking water was tremendous. People were thriving only on the supply from the mainland, and that was not adequate, also not selected properly. People could not cultivate for long years, and it actually triggered the out migration from the delta. So it happened. So that event actually produced a more vulnerable community with lesser resilience. And again, in on the 20th of May to 2021, we witnessed Amphan with much higher wind speed. So here, that mostly damaged the physical infrastructure. Only 43 villages inundated in contrast to Ayla, but this time the physical infrastructure loss was much higher than Ayla. This time the government and people were a bit alert from their recent experience of Cyclone Bulbul in November 2019. But there was no post-disaster need assessment, PDNA, to implement proper rescue and relief operations. People were trapped in their home due to COVID restrictions and got the opportunity to spend time in the Delta in the name of relief distribution, which I used to say as relief tourism. Okay. So the tremendous amount of plastics were used during this relief distribution, which is dangerous for this dynamic and sensitive ecosystem. The entire process actually followed very much short-term responses only, without any long-term mitigation and preparedness plan after Ayla. So we did not really learn something from our past experiences, and still we are responding as there is some kind of emergency or crisis management mode, not in a disaster management mode. So that's very much unfortunate.
I agree, sir. And thank you so much for shedding light on that there's a need for long-term preparedness vis-a-vis short-term response. So, sir, considering preparedness in mind, so we do have a system of early warning for cyclones, and there are some color-coded warnings. And when it comes to the community, perhaps there have been some traditional early warning systems also. So, is there a need to, how do we actually understand these early warning systems, and is there a need to update the traditional knowledge considering the changes in climate change also?
Yeah, actually, if you think so, the local community, the delta dwellers, the rural area people, they do not understand the color coding of the early warning. So we know that the cyclone alert is yellow and the cyclone warning is orange and post landfall outlook is red. All we know, but they don't know and they don't bother actually. Okay. So there are some traditional system of early warning, that is local level loudspeaker announcement within the villages, that is more effective than this kind of color coding. Besides some sharing mobile texts, television and radio alerts, but television and radio is not operational in the night time, so people may not get any warning. So there is some kind of, or everybody is not using mobiles, that may happen. So this kind of local level loudspeaker announcement is much more effective than the traditional early warning system. And in terms of climate change, I can tell you that the people do not really exactly realize the climate change. Rather, they perceive the economic losses caused by climate change. For example, if they face income loss in agriculture practice, they indicate the loss only. And if we ask them what the reasons for that loss are, then only they indicate the salinization of soil, erratic rainfall, and inundation during cyclones, etc., due to the breached embankment. And that is connected with climate change. Okay. So so-called climate change is nothing but a short-term challenge for them, not a long-term anxiety, as per my observation and understanding.
Okay. So, sir, like you mentioned that they may not understand the long-term impacts of climate change, but they do understand and they are affected by short-term economic losses.
Yeah.
So, sir, in that aspect, the cyclone and the climate change, do impact the livelihood of the people. And what can be some of the measures to actually prevent that or restore that?
Yeah. Uh, if we see from ILA, since ILA, I am observing the delta during cyclones. I can tell you that the cyclones are really hampering the life and livelihood of the people. People of Sundarban, I would like to specify Sundarban people. They don't bother about the wind speed or something like that, because wind speed can destroy some part of their house that can be repaired, retrofit. But they really dislike the embankment breaching and the saline water inundation. That is dangerous for them because they cannot cultivate 4 to 5 years also. And this untimely rainfall usually associated with cyclones, which generally cause of the waterlogging, long-term waterlogging. After Amphan, I went there maybe after 1 month also. There are parts of the islands where it was waterlogged, still waterlogged after 1 month. So that is actually responsible for the adverse effect on the agriculture practices. While saltwater inundate the drop of the soil fertility, and they destroy the pond and aquaculture, which makes loss in their income potential. So it is there. The physical damage in their housing can be repaired from their savings. That is also they don't like, but they have to do that. Okay. So these are the things they are experiencing. At the same time, they want some kind of robust embankment protection. So they are indicating that the concrete dams, always they are indicating. But it's true, the subsurface soil quality of Sundarban Delta is not suitable for concrete dams. Okay, so we need to think about some kind of other kind of embankment, which might be very much nature-based solutions with low cost but regular maintenance mode that can protect them, and that is actually their need. But they are always indicating towards the concrete embankments that we need to deal with that and we need to consult with them. Otherwise, we cannot really go forward. And another thing is that whenever there is some kind of embankment breaching, people, the government and the irrigation department who is in charge of embankment construction and maintenance, they used to get away from the river towards the village. So, and they are complaining that we are not getting enough land to construct embankment within the village side. So it's true, but at the same time, we have enough technology. to go forward towards the river? Why we are always going backward? That is my big question. And this time also in different forum, I raised this thing that if we can construct a seawall on the sea in the dynamic system, why can't we go forward towards the river to combat the situation and the hazard? So that is my observation.
Yes, thank you so much, sir. The nature-based solutions would actually be more sustainable and long-term also, and help them with their livelihoods also. So, sir, like you earlier mentioned that Amphan was more difficult because of the COVID-19 pandemic also. And sir, we already have some cyclone shelters prepared at the village level also by the government. So, how effective are these cyclone shelters, especially in the backdrop of a pandemic like COVID?
Yeah, we have a number of multi-purpose cyclone shelters, but if we call them multi-purpose, that should be used in the other time in the year, but that is not really happening. Those are actually lying unused and without any proper maintenance and not with required facilities. So sometimes those are not with sufficient open space for storing incident facilities and relief materials also, because it's on the road and there is no such space. Most importantly, the location of those multipurpose cyclone shelters are not proper, as the risk maps were not used while selecting the location. And we have produced village level risk map, and we have put the location of the multipurpose cyclone shelters. And we found that around 60% of the multipurpose cyclone shelters are not really located in the right place. Okay. And so they are not really efficient to serve the purpose. Sometimes few of them are not accessible also during the cyclone or before the cyclone. But during COVID, those were used as quarantine centers and vaccination center. During cyclones, this could not maintain the COVID protocol, such as keeping safer distance between people. It was not possible. So it also happened. So we are not in a position to efficiently use the multipurpose cyclone shelters so far, but we are spending a lot for that.
So, sir, as I understand, we need to be prepared for complex disasters, a situation of pandemic.
Exactly. The multiple disaster situation we never witnessed, but this time we are witnessing. And the back-to-back, actually the cyclones in 2020 and 21, and again, the Oceani was there. It did not happen, but might happen. So we need to learn from that process also.
Thank you, sir. So, sir, besides these cyclone shelters and undertaking other structural safety measures, what can be done by individuals at homes to prepare themselves when they receive a cyclone warning?
Yeah, from my experience, I can tell you that people have learned few things from the cyclones of recent past. After Bulbul in 2019, when Amphan was there was some early warning. I found people were trimming their branches of the homestay trees, cover the glass window. Sometimes they are wrapping the hatched roof with plastic cover or nets and tying with some kind of pillars, and also retrofit their houses wherever necessary. So they became a little bit aware, and they can find out the way they can protect their house and their pond and also their agricultural land. But that is not sufficient for them because they cannot invest much more and they cannot really innovate much more. So that's the hindrance, but it's there in the process.
So, sir, taking this question forward, do the people, the community, and the government authorities really get enough time if they work after the cyclone warning is received to undertake preparedness measures?
Yeah, there must be some year-long mitigation and preparedness effort from the government in consultation with the community through policy and practice. The process should avoid the traditional top-down approach. It must have the co-design, co-produce, and co-create mechanism, I can tell you. And people want some kind of innovative intervention within the delta for their better survival, for their well-being. And from this thing, I can put some example that government of Odisha has announced that from the coast within 500 meter, there will be no kacha house. So it's there. But that kind of policy we need to incorporate nationally, I think so, in for the coastal states, especially in the eastern coast. And also there are some kind of takeaway that say, for example, the relief materials we are using. I think the relief materials, we are distributing some materials. That is not the proper way. Just for example, I can tell you that we can come up with some kind of community kitchens where people can eat. Okay. And they actually not in a position to cook the raw materials. So we have to come up with some kind of community kitchen. We can provide them some kind of other kind of source of water, which they can also trap from the rain. We are not using that kind of technology or concept, rather there is no technology needed in reality. So these are the things we need to think about more prominently and come up with some kind of prescriptions for year-long experience and year-long practice in future. That is much needed for the better understanding of the risk and the systemic cascading risk, and also come up with some kind of mitigation and preparedness process. So that is from my observation and experience from the day itself.
Thank you so much, sir, for enlightening us on this, and especially on how the cyclones are formed, how actually people are impacted through the livelihood, especially. And what's interesting to note was that we are still in the response phase, and we should actually be thinking about year-long mitigation measures, like you've suggested, and hopefully also bring in innovative approaches along with community participation rather than just top-down policies. And also the implication of risk mapping with the cyclone shelters that should be important and should be undertaken. So sir, thank you so much for this talk. It was personally very enlightening for me, and I hope in this cyclone season everyone stays safe, and wishing you all better preparedness and more resilience against the hazard. Thank you so much. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.